4K Super 35 and 60p is kind of a con for me.
Image quality in 4K 120, soon 4K 60 now.
Now, if you want 4K 60, you gotta go into the Super 35 mode.
4K, wait for it, up to 60 frames per second. Yes! Finally! Yes! 4K 60 frames per second! 4K 60 frames per second!
4K 60 frames per second. What is the big deal with this? Every time Sony releases a brand new camera, this seems to always be something that is focused on. So which ones have it, which ones don't? Today's video, we are going to look at exactly that. Which Sony cameras have 4K 60 at the fullest, and which ones have it but suffer from the crop factor. So if this video helps you out, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more. 60 frames per second is exactly what you would think it is. You have more frames per second, therefore what you can do with that footage is you can slow it down and get some really nice, creamy, slow motion footage. But at the benefit, should you not want to use that, technically you can drop 60 frames per second into a 24 frame timeline and it won't look too off. So there's a lot of value to having it. Now, what is a crop factor? At the end of the day, it basically, simplistically put, it is a zoom in, a forced zoom in on the sensor, so that way your footage comes out nice and clean. And some cameras have it, some cameras don't need it, some cameras allow you to choose between using it depending on so many different factors. The idea is, imagine you're using a 35mm and you are forced into a crop of 1.5. Now your 35mm lens is essentially a 50, which changes the composition of your shot. So let's jump into it and line up the Sony cameras that all have some form of 4K 60 frames per second. First, we have the incredible Sony a7S III. This camera has 4K 60 and does not suffer any crop at all, and is even able to go up to 4K 120 frames per second with only a little 1.1 times crop. Next is the Sony a7 IV, the one that I'm using. This camera does shoot 4K 60, but it will force you into APS-C mode, which is the crop sensor, making your shot cropped in by 1.5 times, and it does not have 4K 120 frames per second at all. You do get it in HD though. The latest Sony a7R V is able to shoot 4K 60 as well, but can't quite pull off the uncropped expectation. However, it does has a slightly smaller crop of 1.24 times instead of the full APS-C crop. Also, being a photo first camera in the R lineup, it also doesn't get 4K 120. Sony's flagship camera, the A1, can record 4K 60 without a crop, as well as 4K 120 with no crop, which you would expect from the most expensive camera. Though to be fair, it is due for a Mark II version any year now. I'm thinking as late as 2025, but as early as next year. Moving on to the latest in the Sony lineup, the Sony a7C II and a7C-R. Just as their larger counterparts, the Sony a7C II, being a mini a7 IV, gets the same 4K 60 crop at 1.5 times, and the a7C-R, being a mini a7R5, gets the 4K 60 but with the 1.24 times crop. These do also suffer the lack of 4K 120. Sony's cinema lineup can get really crazy, so we are sticking to the cameras that are targeted at the individual, so don't expect the FX6 or higher. However, the FX3 does have 4K 60 with no crop and up to 4K 120 with the small 1.1 crop that the Sony a7S III has. Now, its APS-C counterpart, the FX30, though technically it is already cropped on a crop sensor, it does in fact record 4K 60, but it has a very, very fine, negligible 1.04 times crop. However, this does get 4K 120 frames per second with a 1.5 times crop. And speaking of APS-C cameras, the latest A-series camera, the 6700, may be a crop sensor from the start, but it has no crop at all on the 4K 60, and similar to the FX30, you will see a 1.5 times crop at 4K 120. And finally, the Sony ZV-E1, being the amazing little compact full-frame camera that it is, has no crop 4K 60 and incredibly no crop 4K 120. It's a short one today, so if this video helped you understand which cameras have what type of 4K 60 frames per second, then give this video a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.